This conversation originally premiered at CFF on March 27th, 2025, and was co-created and presented by our community partners at inkCanada. Adapting a novel for the screen is a delicate balance of reverence and reinvention, honoring the words while finding their visual heartbeat. Today, we're diving into that creative process with a team that has done just that. Cheers to the celebrated writer Karen Walton in conversation with director Naomi Jaye of the multi-award-winning film Darkest Miriam and author Martha Baillie of the acclaimed novel Incident Report. Welcome to the Fest.
I want to introduce you both properly. Do you mind? So just by way of introduction, as you can see, I've also brought what I now call the Miriam kit. I didn't have plain folders because I respond to color well. But if when I show you the book, you will understand why this movie and this work of literature really is an incredible story about adaptation. But first of all, let's get down to it. Naomi had her feature debut, The Pin, which opened in theaters across North America to rave reviews. Alumni of the prestigious TIFF Studio, Torino Film Lab, Berlin Talents, and TIFF Talent Lab, she is in development on her next feature, The Common Father, about a woman's journey in search of her past. Having recently expanded her screen-based practice to include large-scale video installation, Naomi's company, Tremendous Productions, best company title ever, has mounted 3 large-scale video installations in as many years with partnerships including Theatre Passe Muraille, TO Live, and the Harbourfront Centre. Her next project, Slow, is a human-powered installation that explores Parkinson's and the aging body. And of course, she is the, as we mentioned, multiple CSA-nominated filmmaker behind the literary adaptation to film, which we call Darkest Miriam. And next, one of my all-time favorite Canadian authors, Martha Baillie, who is behind the original literary material called The Incident Report. Martha Baillie works part-time at a public library in Toronto. Her memoir, which is unbelievably great, her memoir, There Is No Blue, was awarded the Writers' Trust Hillary Weston Prize for Nonfiction in 2024. Her novel, The Incident Report, nominated for the Scotiabank Giller Prize, has been adapted, of course we know this, the feature film Darkest Miriam, and I'm just going to skip ahead. Her novel, The Search for Heinrich Schlögl, was an Oprah's editor's pick. Her book, Sister Language, also spectacular, co-written with her late sister, Christina Baillie, was a work of call and response about schizophrenia and language. It was a 2020 Trillium Award finalist. Martha's nonfiction can be found in Brick, a literary journal. Her poetry has appeared in the Iowa Review. Her multimedia project, based on the search for Heinrich Schlögl, is archived at www.schlogl. It doesn't have the umlaut, if you speak German like I do. So no umlaut for Schlögl. When it should be Schlögl, but it's Schlögl online, okay? .ca. Just pay attention. We're with the serious literary minded here, and I want you to pay attention. All right, that said, I'm not going to introduce myself because this floor belongs to these 2 superpower talents. And I just had a quick note, speaking of adaptations, and I'm embarrassed I didn't catch it at the time. But I know the panel blurb suggests that we are going to talk about creative choices in terms of literary adaptation, and yet somehow start with, quote unquote, acquisition. And of course, acquisition, after I reviewed the film and did the book, read the whole book, went back to the film, acquisition sounded incredibly foreign and somewhat hostile as a concept.
I asked Martha, can I have your book? And she said yes.
There you go.
Acquisition story.
So I have a theory. And my theory is what I bumped on in that blurb belatedly, this is nobody's fault but my own, because I went, yeah, sure, say that, was the idea that the process of adapting works specifically of literature of any kind, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, begins with a business transaction. And in my experience, and maybe yours as well, it does not. In fact, a real story behind the story, or stories in this case, often begins with a reader choosing to pick up a particular book, and an author, even way before that, choosing to put down and share something, a story that they are committing to paper and offering to the rest of us. So in my opinion, adaptations actually begin in the relationship between the author and the cinematic storyteller.
I mean, what I responded to, you have the book. What I responded to, I was in Book City on Danforth. I tell the story in every interview, so some of you may have heard this, but I was in Book City on Danforth. My friend Denise was late, so I went into the bookstore, and I was just like looking around, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw that, and I was like, oh my God, look at that cover. I love that cover. Because I was at that time obsessed with photocopying objects to flatten them. I had a day job in an office and it was really boring, so I would do weird stuff. Anyway, so I picked up the book because I love the cover. And then you see when you open the book an incident report that has been photocopied. And there were just all these little clues and treasures in the book before you even got to writing. And then I love the quality of the paper. It felt really good and thick, and it had a nice texture. It really is a beautiful object. So that is what I responded to. And then when I read the first incident, I literally, in the bookstore, I looked at the back. I'm like, who published this? I found their phone number, and I called her, Beth Follett, who has very, very good taste, obviously. And I left a message saying, I just found this book, and I want to make it into a movie. And then I rode the streetcar home after meeting my friend, read as much of it as I could on the streetcar, got home to the interwebs because I did not have a smartphone at the time. And I stalked Martha, I found her website, and I emailed her actually, didn't I? And I found that email actually. And I was like, I love this book. I just called your publisher because I didn't know who owned it. I'd never adapted anything before. So it was total love at first sight because of the object.
This is a beautiful book. If you are a book fan, and even if you're not, I highly recommend picking it up for a couple of reasons. The first is you can fall in love with it at first sight. The second is, and I read this interview with Martha some time ago, she was talking about her ethical and aesthetic concerns. And I just want to thank in advance if any of the original interview writers and journalists are here. Thank you. Thank you. Research matters. I love that you called the publisher. At inkCanada, we spend a lot of time talking about, I have a book that I would like to adapt. What do I do first? And a lot of bad advice ensues. So I would like to hear the story from Martha's point of view. You, before there was a book, had some concerns about how to write it, what to write it like. Can you explain what the voice imitator is?
So I've worked for many decades now, part-time in public libraries. And a great many strange things occur in public libraries because everybody comes through the doors of a public library, or a great range of people, which is why I like working there. And sometimes these things are very disturbing, and so we end up telling stories amongst ourselves. So there's a whole sort of oral storytelling that goes on. And way back when, I had a young daughter, who's now an older daughter, and every time we'd get in a car with a friend of hers, her friend would go, tell me a library story. So I would be telling all these ribald stories, and at the back of my mind thinking, how on earth would you put this on paper? Because behind all this humor is an enormous amount of tragedy. And that's why for many years, I didn't put any of this down on paper. And then at a certain point, my late sister, recommended to me a book by Thomas Bernhard, an Austrian writer, called The Voice Imitator. And he worked apparently as a court reporter at some point in his youth. And The Voice Imitator is just a collection of tiny anecdotes. Everyone takes up about a page. They're completely absurd. Like the firemen are gathered with their blanket, and the man who's going to kill himself is about to jump, and they're going to prevent it, and at the last minute, as the man jumps, one of the firemen panics and lets go of the blanket. Or the mayor of Pisa and the mayor of Venice have agreed to exchange the Leaning Tower for the Bridge of Sighs, and they both end up in jail. But all these absurdities are told in a very formal language. It's very European. It's kind of dehumanizing but elegant at the same time. Sort of like being late but fashionably. And so you sort of, I thought, oh, we write incident reports. Here are these court reports. We take all this bit of human experience when something disturbing happens and we cram it into this little form. And it immediately has an air of absurdity. Maybe if I were to write a novel that was completely comprised of incident reports, I could make something as fragmented as the lives of the people I'm depicting. So if the structure echoed the fragmentation of being unhoused, or the fragmentation that comes with many forms of mental ill health, then that would be respectful. And if I did a straight-ahead, linear, traditional novel, all these people might become decorative elements, which I absolutely don't want. And I want as much craziness on both sides of the desk. That was the reality, therefore let's portray it that way. So it's just going to be a cosmos of craziness. And so I wrote the book, and my previous book had been published by Knopf, and my agent looked at it and she said, if you cherish your relationship with Knopf, put this in a drawer. They are never going to touch this. So I was like, okay, well, too bad for them. We're sending it to them. They can say no. They'll say this is not for our list, and that will be the end of it. And instead they wrote like a page-long explanation of everything that was wrong with this book and why it would be bad for my career to publish it. So I thought, no one is ever going to know this book exists. People seem to be struggling to know this even is a novel, though if it had Paul Auster on the front and they could sell his name, they would immediately understand it was a novel. But because it doesn't, they don't seem to be able to know what to do with it. So I'm going to make sure it's a beautiful object. And I had seen Beth Follett is a one-woman press, she still is a one-woman, but her press has closed. And she worked very closely with a brilliant designer, Zab Hobart, and all her books were gorgeous and unusual. And I thought, okay, if this is going to travel by word of mouth, let it be a beautiful object. Yes. And its beauty as an object is what led to this film. So it all worked out. As you say, it was very organic and it was not at all corporate.
I just love that. It just in no way surprises me, but I have kind of goosebumps because it won't come with my mess of stickies. I do apologize. But this is how I break down someone else's story.
That's what my book looks like.
Did you do the color-coded highlighting?
I do color-coding, highlighting. I numbered.
Okay, now we're going to get into it. Because I was scared to color code when an actual real-life public library worker was going to be here, who is the author. And I was like, I can't wreck a book just to do my work. That's selfish. But it is my coffee. I didn't go to the library and borrow one in case I ruined it, because it is a beautiful object, and it's the object you picked up. So talk to me very early on, just before the story begins. In the book, there is a quote, and the quote is, "Without a library, you have no civilization." And I believe, Naomi, that is the world that you have adapted so poetically and quite elegantly and hilariously and heartbreakingly in the movie. So what is a library to you? It is the world of this movie.
I mean, I do love libraries, and I grew up going to libraries. My mom would take my brother and I to the library every single week, and we would watch a puppet show. And then we would look at books, and so it's part of my youth, and then it's part of my high school, less, but university, a huge part of university. And then I wrote the whole book I wrote in a library. Like, I wrote everything in the library, all the meetings I would have with people. We would rent those thingies in the Central Reference Library, what are they called, pods or whatever. It was always in libraries because I just wanted to watch everyone all the time in libraries. I'm fascinated by them.
And then a 35-year-old library worker, formerly called a cleric, now about a month before the published story opens, they changed the title to Public Service Assistant in this cosmos. I love that word because to me that's what the world of the original and the adapt is. It's a cosmos. And a lady named Miriam Gordon is an employee at the public library that has all kinds of layers to it as a fact in itself. So you call, and somebody might have called you. Did you meet by email, by Naomi's? How did you have your first conversation, and what did Martha make of it?
I don't actually remember, but I think we corresponded, and then they were like, well, what does this look like? And I was like, well, I don't know. Because I'd never adapted, so I wrote a friend who was a producer. I'm like, what does this look like? And so she's like, then we get into the contract part. She's like, well, they need to agree, and then you need a letter of understanding, because you probably have no money, so you can't pay them right away. And I was like, okay. And then we did meet. We met at Calendar on college. You, Beth, and I. Didn't we? Wasn't it there?
I don't remember.
Now,
Anyway,
I
we had a
remember
conversation. We had a
so
conversation.
Beth is the publisher. Sorry to interrupt. Beth is the publisher. You're emailing with Martha. Beth is like, time to, put a ring on it. Nobody's got any money. It's not a corporate acquisition. It is two artists who have found each other over somebody's work.
Well, there was like, what are you going to do with it? Because
I'm
Martha didn't know me, and I didn't. I mean, I was like, I love this book, but I don't know you. And so at a certain point, I can't remember if I offered it up, but I was like, I've made these shorts, and I'm going to write a treatment. Like, I'm going to write, this is what I want to do with your story. And I sent those things to you.
Yeah, my memory is just going, who is this person? And is she going to do exactly what I didn't want to do in the novel and turn it into this very straightforward,
straight A to B
story with
classic
all these
patriarchy
decorative, bizarre people
storytelling
attached? So I said, can I see, what have you made? And Naomi sent me 2 shorts. You made them in film school, right? Was it in film school?
I never went to film school.
You never went to film school, so I've been lying all this time.
I went to the CFC. I went to the CFC, but I didn't study film. But I had made these 2 shorts.
She had made 2 short films in her garage. And the first one was just wacko insane, hilarious. And I thought, okay, she completely gets that part of the novel and highly original. And then the second one was sort of heartbreaking, a bit very painterly, like a painting by Andrew Wyeth. You were supposedly in an airport, but people were sitting on folding chairs. And there's a man waiting, and then eventually this woman arrives in a kerchief and speaks in Russian into a telephone, like a telephone booth, and then they sit next to each other. And almost the whole film is just these 2 people sitting next to each other. But by the end, you're heartbroken, and they've said almost nothing. And I thought, all right, she's brilliant. She can do heartbreak, and she can do crazy, and that's what's in the book. So, sure, I can trust you.
I'll have a coffee.
I mean, I think
you.
it's about trust.
Yes.
Trust is huge, and trust is huge in the book. So it all sort of fits together in that regard.
Such a beautiful work, 2 beautiful works on trust. So incredibly beautiful. But to me, the adaptation story is as much about your relationship, because I'm not sure if we've made this clear for anybody who, doesn't spend late nights reading past interviews. This wasn't yesterday. This wasn't someone's corporate lawyer called somebody's people and it all came together. This was quite some time ago. When was the incident report first published, which is a feat in itself?
2009.
And Naomi, when did you start sending emails and making phone calls from bookstores?
2010.
And if I may, there was an adaptation before this that you decided to do. Well, first, I'm going to roll that back. When you had to come down to terms, and would this person ruin my story or do exactly to it, what I didn't want to happen and the reason I was thinking about aesthetics and ethics and all this kind of stuff before I wrote it. Did you talk about the kind of relationship you might have going forward with the film?
I mean, to be honest, I don't remember, but we obviously did.
All I remember is me saying, I know nothing about making films.
I
So
mean, basically,
I'm going to trust you to do this because I've never written a film script. Why would I try to write a film script? I have no idea how a film script relates. I love films. I know what I love in films, but I have no idea how that film was made, let alone how what's on paper relates to it. So if I see something written on paper, I'm going to come at it with my editorial pen and try and turn it into a short story or a novel. You do what you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I said, can I have your book? And Martha said, I mean, ultimately, okay. And Beth said, okay. And then I was like, I'll keep you posted.
And then at one point you told me you were going to throw the librarian into a hole.
There were many, yes. So, but basically that was it. And Martha was just incredibly trusting of what I was doing. She never read anything, nothing until we were going to shoot.
Do you think, Martha, that would be different in hindsight? Or for your next, the next call from a bookstore or a publisher, that does get it as opposed to doesn't?
If I wanted to be more involved at the writing level, it would more be because I've become really curious about how films are made. Now, having spent a lot of time on set and spent a lot of time with the actors, not at all because I'm unhappy with the result. I feel like this was totally the right approach because I don't think you could have done the same thing if I'd been there going, oh, but wait, what about those 6 other patrons that you haven't fit in? And what about,
I mean, that's the honest
what I
truth.
Didn't want to have happen.
And Martha's wisdom of letting it go and my instinct of like, I don't know how to do this. If she's, I need to just make it into a film. So I don't actually know how to do that. I've never adapted.
You want to focus.
Not even focus. Like, it's not embarrassment, but it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I just need to like be over here doing and figuring out. And I don't think it's going to be useful in a sense for Martha to be part of that or witness that. I can't imagine being like, here, make my movie into a book. You know what I mean? I would hate that. It's like very uncomfortable feeling, I imagine. So it was just like, I needed freedom to just do it and figure it out. And thankfully, Martha, that was just how it was. And it was just very freeing. Like I just had to figure it out.
And I think we had the proof because at the very end, after Britt Lauer had come to the library and everything, right? And at that point, I had the script. And I think you were encouraging me to look at it just to see if there were any weird things library related that were out of whack. That, someone doing something that they would not be doing work-wise in a library. And so then I started reading it. And then I went very quickly, don't keep reading. Because I was already getting out my editor. I was already going, what do you mean? This guy's going to say a line like, would you like to come see my art sometime? I'm like, oh my God, what a horrible conventional thing. Like, what a pickup line. What the fuck is this doing in my book?
I would never write that.
So I went, okay, stop reading immediately. We had a few little tense sort of emails back where I was like, ah! And then we were like, okay, stop reading. That was the right move to never look at. And then everything went back to exactly, I would think, how we did it before. And we've discussed doing a project together where we would, from the start, make it together. And then that would be more like the collaborative thing I did with my sister, where you're, you're both agreeing from the start, this is something you're writing together.
You're going to figure out how to do it together.
You're both in that space of like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. You're in that together. Then that you're both at that phase at the same time. Whereas I'm finished when I'm writing it, I'm exactly where you are. What am I doing? What is this? But I'm no longer there and you're entering that space. So we would be completely out of sync if we'd tried to do this together. Whereas starting from the start, we could both be lost.
That's right.
At once.
It's almost like story advantage. I've already walked this path. You figure it out. But this is really interesting to me because when you open a book, fall in love, some mega author says yes, and you get to play with it, and you say, as I always do, and I think lots of us do, I think, honestly, the worst adaptations are made by the people who just know exactly. I know what I'm going to do to it as opposed to with it. And what's staggeringly beautiful about this movie is it felt, especially after you read the book, you go back to the movie and it felt like someone cared enough to be, and that's why I was so curious about what your relationship was during the writing of the screenplays, because we all know there are drafts for a reason. But where did you begin? You scored up the book. You had the publisher. You had Martha. Who else is around you in terms of...
No one. I got a Canada Council grant to write the script. So I had a little bit of money. So I mean, I've always had day jobs, but I could like lighten the day job. And I didn't know what to do, though. I was like, I don't know how to adapt. How do I do this? So then I started just getting technical because I'm like, I have to do something. So I'm like, okay. So I broke it down into library incidents from the past, Yanko love story, father. Because that's what when I wrote the treatment that I sent to Martha, this is what I think. I think it's about this, it's about memory, fact, fiction, all of these, like what is real, what is not, who's a ghost, who is not, all of, like it's about that blending of this world. Like you can't tell what's real and what's not. And I also wrote that to me, the central image, because I'm very, very visual, I only write because no one's giving me scripts to direct. Literally the only reason that I started writing was because I was like, I want to direct.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything to direct. So then I need to write it. So it's not like I have this skilled practice of writing. It's like really fucking hard. And then I don't know what I'm doing.
Right?
Yeah. But I wrote to Martha, like to me, the central image when I close my eyes or when it comes to me in my brain, there's a man surrounded by books, hung dead. And there's a woman who has chosen to surround herself by books, living. She's an emotional suicide. She is recreating the circumstance of her father's death and living inside it. That was the central image. And I had this bird's eye view shot, which does not exist in the film, of like what that was going to look like. So I told Martha, this is what this book is about for me. So then you start like kind of, I was like breaking it up and all the characters and who was I going to include and who was not going to include. And I listed all the characters and I was just breaking it, like, it was like spreadsheet work because I didn't know what to do.
Especially because the original is deliberately and conscientiously and beautifully, but it's like, is it 155, 145? 44, to me, poems. And even as I say that, goosebumps. Like, you can't put it down, not because it's short or long, incident by incident, but because you are being seduced into what's really going on. And in my opinion, I haven't read the shooting script, but I did see the final cut. And the final cut is that same feeling that while we're watching, while we think we know where it's going, Miriam and the world and the director are taking us through layers and layers of incredibly elegant and thoughtful and hilarious at times moments where we become aware of what we as the audience are putting on what must be going on. And that's so essential to the book. And I think giving ourselves permission to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. In both cases, to me, is that story, that evolving story's relationship with its original iteration. There was an installation. Is installation the right word? Somewhere along the way, because, you weren't teed up, whatever that means. You hadn't done a feature yet, I believe, by 2010. Mm-hmm. You weren't all stacked with people to call because you found a beautiful
I just didn't have a producer. I didn't have producers for such a long time. I couldn't find a producer. So I had versions of the script and it's not like I was writing for 10 years. I wasn't. you write a draft, and then I'm like, okay. And then there's some movement. I got into something called the Torino Labs, which was an adaptation lab at that point, particular to adaptation. And that was very useful. And then there was some movement, and then there was nothing. And I was like, oh my God. So at that point, I just wanted to do something with the material.
Yeah.
So I said to Martha, I'm going to make it into an installation for my master's thesis. I don't know what you said to that, actually. Probably like, amazing.
Martha's smiling in
Likely.
the photos, so which was my first encounter of like just start. The first page I looked up on the interwebs was you two together, like with these big grins on, and I'm like, who are these women, and how do I get to hang out with them? Yeah.
Well, and then I don't know if you were nervous to see the installation.
I was very curious.
Curious to see the installation, but you liked it.
Yeah, it was very different from the film because the whole Yanko story is not in there.
That's right.
So-
It was called
It's called Miriam's World, and it was I just pulled from the screenplay, and it was 9 screens, 8 screens in a big space, and it was life-size people, and then like a library, a tactile library made of chairs and books and blah, 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 papers and folders, and Miriam's desk was there, and so it's sort of like an escape room maybe. There was all sorts of stuff you could rifle through and look at, and then there were these patrons as big as life on scrim, so they look kind of like holograms.
Yeah.
And that was a crazy shoot. Talk about spreadsheet, because they all had to move. They moved and talked to each other from screen to screen, but we're shooting them all on the same piece of set, one at a time. And they had to look at each other and react to each other one at a time. It was bonkers. Anyway, thankfully it worked. And I think what that one felt like was what it would be like to be a librarian, actually. Because it's on a 20-minute loop, and it circles and circles, and it's like Sisyphus. It's like this thing that every day she goes through all these people, hilarious and devastating people around her.
And it's quite amazing because there's a brilliant moment where Rigoletto, some of the music from Rigoletto plays an important part in the film. And at one point, all these characters in the library start lip syncing to this aria from Rigoletto, and at the same time they're dancing to the music, but they're each dancing in character. So you're surrounded, it was just great to see, these wild things are happening that I couldn't possibly do on the page, but they're all absolutely true to what I'm trying to achieve with words and paper. But here, wow, I get to actually stand in the middle of it. That was a pretty amazing gift to me, and I think to anyone who had the good fortune to experience your wild installation.
So that exact feeling, and the author is like, what's this going to be like? And then there's the first, I don't know if iteration is the right word, but there's your first, I can't wait, I'm going to move this forward. I'm also, going to use it in my scholarly expression, and it goes well. And yet you can't find a producer to move it forward, as if that ever happens to anyone else.
It never happens to anyone.
May I be kind of nosy and ask what the issue was? There a common issue? Did they read the book and go, I don't know what this is?
It may have been what Knopf. It may have been that. It may have been that it was just too like, what is this thing? Potentially, maybe. But I literally also, I'm into spreadsheets. I had like a spreadsheet of every producer that I could ever know in Toronto. And I called all of them, and everyone said no. So it was like a list of like probably 45 to 50 people. So, I mean, you never know. Who knows? I'm also not a proven entity. Who knows?
At that point,
but like, I don't know. It wasn't everyone had full slates. It wasn't necessarily personal either, which is what I learned. It just that's how it happened.
In my very limited experience, I would never call 45 people because I just don't take it seriously.
I was like, it's 15 years I've been, so I was like, God damn, like,
where are they?
And that's why I made the installation, because I was like, God damn, like, this is crazy. I'm making something out of this because it's like taking too long.
Exactly. And I'm like, wait, it's Martha Baillie wrote it. What is your What?
What's your problem?
But in my completely inappropriate observations, producers don't read enough books. Sometimes they miss stuff, or they don't read closely. This is just screenwriters' complaints now. But this is why I feel like I am not a filmmaker. I am a screenwriter who, in other forms, also produces. But in film, the dedicated screenwriter, in all the jobs in the world, has the most in common with the poets and the novelists and the nonfiction writers, because we often encounter this, where we, for many, many reasons, cannot find a match. And all we're doing is writing stories. And it's not like it sounds like, oh, that's cheap and easy and you can do it in the middle of the night. But that probably wasn't your experience with moving this story forward for yourself as the filmmaker. You're doing treatments, you're risking showing them to the author who's please don't make it exactly what I was avoiding doing. Who says yes?
Julie Baldassi said yes. And then through a series of circumstances, she brought on Brian Robertson as a partner.
Do you know why they said yes?
I mean, they liked the script and they liked my first film, basically. I mean, so Julie's partner is Michael LeBlanc, who is the DOP, the cinematographer. And he was the cinematographer on my first feature called The Pin. So we met for coffee. I had just had a baby. He's like, I want to meet the baby. So we met for coffee and he's like, I may know someone. What's that script that you had? And so then that's how she got the script. And then that's how it all happened.
And meanwhile, a bit of business about adaptation agreements and original property and trying 15 years to move something forward towards a movie. There's often a ticking clock.
In this case, to be honest, no, because they were just like, cool. Like, it really was, like, looking back, I'm like, oh my God, this is never going to happen again. But
not anymore.
So I optioned in 2010 and I was like, when I get some money, I'm going to start paying you. And then when I went to Adapt Lab, there was a lawyer who came to talk to us and he's like, you have what on a piece of paper? He's like, make this legal, So that's when I hired a lawyer and we made an actual agreement. And then we had the whole terms of how this was going to go down. And then it was just like renew.
And in between, some woman kept writing to us and going, can I buy the rights, option this to make a TV series? And we kept going, no, sorry, Naomi's making a movie. And then 5 years later, she'd write to us again and go, can I make this into a TV series? And we go, no, I'm sorry, Naomi's making a movie.
That was the question I exactly wanted to ask at this point. Meanwhile, who is calling the author? I worked on an adaptation for a very long time. It was a film. It was a TV show. It was a TV show and a film package. It was every iteration at that time people felt, for reasons that escape me, would be effective in getting this story out and into people's living rooms or into the cinemas. And at the end of the day, the author and I became very close because the wait and the reiterate and the reiterate. And I knew, as I was adapting, how often Hollywood was calling this, at the time, undiscovered or underknown author with this massive... Anyway, so that was my question, is were you aware that Martha was constantly that you were being checked on?
She reached out to me and she was like, someone's asking. And I'm like, I'm
in charge.
It's mine.
It's mine. You cannot have it. I got a lawyer and everything. But I do want to stress that because there's a lot of folks, certainly in the common talking sphere about writing, and we have a lot of authors, and we have a lot of adapting screenwriters at inkCanada as a community. And very often the great myths are, you can buy it for $1, which assumes they're going to say yes. It also assumes you're the only one. It also assumes you're the only filmmaker who might have a very different vision for this kind of work, and that asking what that vision is your right and, in fact, your responsibility. And I found both works so much about personal responsibility or hiding from it or embracing it. The themes of responsibility were a big part of it. So we've got the spreadsheet, we've got people calling, but we're solid. Finally, some producers moving it forward. And at one point, am I wrong? Was Maureen Dory not involved as a story editor? And
Yes.
I ask on the literary side, in case you're only in books and curious what we're saying, is, of course, there was an editor for the original story as well.
Yeah, so Maureen I had met at the Canadian Film Centre, and I can't remember in what capacity she was there, but I had met her there. And then when Brian and Julie came on, they're like, we got to do another draft. I'm like, amazing. And so I was like, okay, well, Maureen, like, I don't know what to do with this anymore, you know. So Maureen came on, and we met every week pre-pandemic in the Central Reference Library.
This brings me to the next one. Casting and performance and styling the film, where your books don't exist in a vacuum. They don't get out. You don't find them in the bookstore by magic, by one woman sitting down and being a genius about it. That would take forever. You would die selling books on a corner that you made at Staples in the business center. So there are people around you that are moving things forward, the producers. But in film, we are also engaging and involving other artists. We love what they do, but now they too are joining the adaptation, in my mind. Is that like incredibly naive? So when you get to performance and who would say what and how they would say it, or get to strip it down again after the producers pass, the clarity pass, I call it.
No, but I know what will happen in the edit.
Do go on. How do you know? What are you doing?
I don't know what will happen in the edit. In fact, I really don't know what will happen in the edit. But from past experience with films, and everyone works differently, and before Woody Allen was like discovered to be really problematic, I read that his films, if you look at the shooting script and the final film, the same but completely different. And then I was like, oh, that's okay then. What I do is okay, because my films are completely different from the script. Except, of course, that is exactly the same story, but it's not the script.
Well, I personally believe, and this is very different from publishing in process, that the picture edit, the sound edit, which is a reference to the incident report, because there's this beautiful line, sound is more reliable. There's an early mention of sound right before Martha's description of who Miriam is. And then we see the final picture, and I'm like, imagine this movie without sound, without the way you styled sound. So you're not shooting for that. I'm saying there are so many other artists involved in realizing it, and that tension or distraction of what had to be on the page for everyone to sign the checks, to move it forward to camera.
Yeah, I don't know
is what? What's
if
the
it
key
was
difference?
so intentional, but I'm someone who is very interested in artistic process, and I think ultimately, hopefully, not always, but when things happen gracefully, the project will kind of circle back to what it's supposed to be. We shot the script, but there were certain lines that I knew would go, and there were certain moments where I was like, that's probably like, I don't know if that's going to survive. But then when you actually, especially on low budget films, I think it's different with larger, and it's just different with different directors. But that you then, and I say this, I teach at TMU, I say this to my students all the time. You write a film, you shoot a film, you edit a film. That's 3 different films. And then when you're shooting a film, especially under duress, you can't control what happens at all. It just kind of comes out, and then you're like, okay, next, move on, because that's what you have to do. So then you actually just have a bunch of material, and it is your job to throw away the script and to make the best possible film out of what you have. And that may or may not match the original intention, or it may or may not, I think with the 2 features that I've made, it actually does. Like, not to toot my own horn, but I think it's a good adaptation. Like, I think it does represent the book,
I think
and the first film that I made, The Pin, also, if you looked at the timeline and you looked at the scene numbers, you'd be like 125, 34, 28. Like, it doesn't go as it was supposed to go, but it absolutely is the script. Like, it's the same story, but you have to shuffle.
This is my point. I think filmmaking and writing, particularly novels, have a lot in common that way, which is Michael Turner, novelist in British Columbia, used to say, people are going to see in it whatever they're going to see. You cannot control that, but you can open the door. And screenwriting is never finished. That doesn't mean you shouldn't finish your drafts, because if it doesn't make sense to everyone who might read it, not you, not your best friend, not, if you have a parent who always says everything you do is wonderful, lucky you, everyone, even people you think or imagine you might not like, have to be able to see where you're going with this, what the experience might be like in the audience watching it. Shooting it is another adaptation. Editing it, especially for screenwriters, the edit is the final rewrite. It doesn't mean, and I was going to ask you about that, the book, so true, so many moments in the film, so true to Martha's original versions in terms of incidents, but where they happen when transforms it into a cinematic experience for me, and I don't want to put anything on it, but ask, is that one of the things that happened in editing, is where moments began and ended?
Yes. Like, it doesn't happen in the order that it was written. But the content obviously is the same because that's what we shot. So, yes, but it's like a reordering and you have to I think you just, whatever shines and whatever feels true, bring forward. And I've never had to not cut around performance because I haven't, but these two are exceptional actors and the day players as well. So that was you're also in terms of performance, you either believe someone or you don't. And if you don't believe them, then that does not go in the film unless you are really in a tight spot and they have to be in the film. So there's all sorts of reason why things change in the edit, but for me anyway, for better or for worse, I would much rather have a much shorter film, just get rid of everything that is not what it should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't, but then TV doesn't exist in the same way anymore, but there used to be kind of these times that you had to hit, and I would much rather sacrifice that to have a stronger film than stick to that and have a weaker film. If you leave things in that shouldn't be there for whatever reason, well, they just shouldn't be there. So you got to get rid of them.
It feels like you didn't get to finish it the way it has grown to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If this were a studio film.
Yeah.
Guffaw. I would never have been able to edit it the way that we did. There's no way.
You wouldn't have been able to move the tiles?
I don't think so. I don't know. Who knows? But I think they wouldn't have let
Hollywood filmmakers, anyway. Talk about, if we can, you mentioned you were on set, Martha, sort of doing what I would call a consultant, the skills, the professional consultant who comes in and makes sure that we don't shoot a scene that all they talk about online is how we got that scene wrong from that profession. And yet you're the author, and yet you peek at the script and you start to read it and go, what is this now? Talk a bit about going to set and seeing how not your library, but your library is coming to life around you. Or do you get a peek at that kind of stuff? Do you see how things are being staged?
I mean, the library stuff, if I'd really focused on, is this accurately going to read as a proper library? I think it would have made me very nervous. Because there were certain things we just couldn't overcome. It's shot in
location.
It's shot in the stacks of academic library at McMaster.
In Hamilton?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because then it had to do with timing, availability of space. Plus, there's really no public library in Toronto I can think of where you could get those long stacks that
so
she pushes
gorgeous.
that cart down. That means that every book in that library is Library of Congress. It's not Dewey Decimal System. And every single librarian who sees this movie goes, what the fuck? The wrong little numbers are on the spines of these books. Nobody else is going to care. But every librarian who sees it goes, huh?
But that's what I'm saying. It's so
you just have to sort of, so you just have to sort of go, okay, this is not my domain. They are making the best library they can, and I'm just not going to think about this.
They're doing their best.
Kind of thrilling to just be here. I don't have to work. I just get to watch all these people do this and hang out with. I was much more interested in getting to know who's Tom Mercier and who are who are these people who are becoming these characters that were really only meant to exist inside my head, and now suddenly they're human beings who are going to portray them.
I was
much more interested in who are getting, hanging out with them, discussing.
What is it like?
What's their take on this person that they're going to be?
But what's it like to meet the people in your head who are inspired on and off by people that you actually see in your place of business, the library?
Extremely odd.
I would think that would be weird.
Super trippy.
Very, very, very weird.
I want all the adapting filmmakers to know this.
Also, you take stuff that you've experienced or that's from your childhood or from somewhere, and you bury it in this novel, you hand it to some character, and you never imagine this is ever going to come out of a human being's mouth. Right. And suddenly, a very large human being on a screen is saying all these, suddenly all these people in this story are extremely weird. Why didn't I know that before? Why did I think they were totally normal?
Can I ask a terrible question? Because you've written like 8 amazing books. And same for you. Do you ever forget you read something? Do you ever come across a moment or a line and go, oh, that's quite good. Oh, it's me.
Well, what's funny now is Martha, the other day, she's like, oh, this moment in the film, she's like, was that in the book?
Yes.
And it wasn't.
Oh!
But I went back. So because we were having this conversation today, and because of that moment where I was like, how much of that was in the book, and how much was that Naomi's invention? I went, okay, I haven't read this book in 10 years. I have to crack it open and see what's actually in there. There are a lot of clues. Like there are a lot of. It didn't come out of nowhere. There were a lot of clues. What you did with it was. We're talking about the sex scenes in the book. What you did with it is exquisite. But yeah, there it's very understated. It's very, but there are a lot of clues. The tone of what is there. So I was like reassured. Okay, it is there, but not how it actually plays out, which is fantastic.
Well said. I would like your permission to open it up to questions because I know I am hogging you as a super fan all to myself, both of you. Does anyone have any questions?
Karen, do you mind repeating it?
Sure. Why did you decide, tell me if I get it wrong, why did you decide to make some of the supporting characters reoccurring and some you saw only once?
Well, the book is, there are so many patrons in the book. That was the hardest thing to let go of because they're all so amazing. And just it's a little bit guided by the book. There are some characters that are regulars in the library and some that are not, or so there wasn't like a strong intellectual or creative reason why it was a little. I don't know if it's following the book even. I can't even tell anymore. But there were it felt like there were patrons who were more regular and who were not as regular in the book.
I just read the book again, so I would say yes, like that cosmos. Where, you might see a moon once every 10 years. The book felt like that as well, that I met people along the way who in the incident report related to them really meant a lot, but they came and went as...
Yeah, structurally within the novel, it's very, you're sort of doing 2 things at once.
Yes.
Because initially I hadn't even thought I was going to put a story in it. I thought I was just going to have all these random episodes hung like paintings in a gallery or like poems in a collection of poetry. And maybe I could dispense with narrative storytelling at all.
No such
And then
luck.
it was really static, and I decided, no, I do need a story.
It really
so if
pulses.
the story goes through, the story's going somewhere, and if all these random events interrupt too often, then they're frustrating. They feel like interruptions. But if the story becomes too strong, then they overwhelm the random events. So the random events have to be connected by emotion like this, and then the story's weaving through it. So which characters reappear will often reappear because there's an image or something about them that links to the story that's being told. So it's all sort of being woven. And I think you think very visually, as I do. So I think we're similar in that process. You're weaving, you're selecting patrons to reappear because they maybe just have a role to play that might even just be visual or an echo of something.
For me, the patrons, ultimately, what the patrons did was either on point or in counterpoint were a direct relation to what Miriam was going through emotionally.
Right. Yeah, because you also have to be more condensed.
Yeah.
Whereas I could have a whole lot more of them that are just there to add.
You can use
an
space
overall,
differently.
I had more space.
Yeah. And this
had a lot more
canvas,
space.
I mean, we start with time-based, which, we've run out of time to get into, but that's a big deal. It's like, yes, there used to be set times, but still, the market, or the better, I prefer, the human beings awaiting this beautiful thing, have lives and days as well. And this is how they get organized to see something in a cinema or on the streamers later or wherever it appears. There are, you don't rent a concert hall and hope you can move in for a week to do one song. So it's also for film about all this gorgeous cosmos compressing, not squeezing, but working with time visually. What can the camera capture? And how does it stay true to what you want to do because you read this? One more? Go ahead.
When I first watched it and it didn't have the sound yet, like the music and all that, we watched it, I think it was like on a small screen. It was you, me, and Brian Robertson. And then and I was like, oh my God, what if I hate this film? And I'm sitting here with these two people. So I watched the film and then they said, so, like, they're both looking at me and
She was silent, I swear to God, for
I'm never
over
silent,
a minute.
as you can already tell. The silent is not me. And I could say nothing. I was so shocked. I couldn't speak. It was like someone had reached inside and taken a whole chunk of my youthful psyche and just smeared it across the screen. I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? It was terrifying. It's as though I buried all these little things in this novel, and then Naomi came along and went,
Great.
I'll take this, and look at that.
Thank
Oh,
you.
and this, and that. Oh.
I guess I need the eggs.
And then I was like, ooh. and then I met Naomi's, I've met Naomi's brother many times, but he came up to me, I think it was after the screening just at on the 24th. And he goes, when I read that novel for the first time, I sort of thought it was an epistolary novel. And I'm going, an epistolary novel? He goes, yeah, it's sort of comprised of like letters from an author to herself about everything she doesn't want to know about herself.
Oh my God, that's...
My brother's very smart.
And I went, who is this family? Why did I run into them?
What have I done?
This is very unnerving. But amazing to have the cast. I will just throw in. The other thing that struck me was how, all the language I put in these people's mouths is very poetic. Like, this is not what normal people would say to each other. And these actors managed to make it totally natural. So, huge gift that you cast this film with Britt Lauer and Tom Mercier. And just speaking with Tom Mercier, you immediately realize through various things that this man adores language. Like language and playing with language is fundamental. We were discussing Rigoletto at one point, and he goes, yeah, but we were discussing parenting and protecting, and I was saying, well, it has to be Rigoletto because it's the horror of not being able to protect the person you love most.
Yeah.
And he's like, because he's a young guy and he's never had kids, he's like, oh, there's this French expression, mettre au monde. You put your children in the world and then who protects them? And I'm going, you're very young.
Yes.
And then we start talking more about Rigoletto and he's going, yeah, but by the end, it's not the daughter who's in the bag because she's disguised as a boy, so it's a son. And he starts going, son in a sack, son in a sack, son in a sack, just kind of riffing on the sounds of son in a sack. And I went, oh, I see why. I see why you like the poetry in this. He really loves the musicality of language.
And it's a musical film.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful film. The book, I heard through Miriam's ears. The movie I experienced through your heart.
I just thought of something that might be interesting in terms of writing for people to know.
Go for it.
So the script was a script, and then very close to shooting, I said to the producers, I want to do these things. I want to do portraits, and I want to have all the characters read what I had called the father monologues, which were writings that Miriam wrote about her father. And to their credit, on this 20-day shoot that was so jam-packed, they were like, okay. So we added all this material, and they were like, are you sure? Like, this is going to be in the film. And it literally was not placed in the script. There was nowhere in the script. But I was like, I know that I need these things. And they said, okay. So we shot. And the first AD was like, what is this? Because it's not in the script. Yeah. So we shot all of these portraits and monologues. We any moment we had, we put them in. Because I somehow knew that they would be in the film, but I didn't know how and I didn't know where.
And
so
they're key. They're essential.
Is, yeah.
The film would not be the film without them. And as soon as you started shooting them, I was like, this is amazing.
This is correct.
Like distributing, because the father bits are distributed all through the novel, but you can't.
Yes.
Because the film is much more plot driven, if I can use that word. It's much more focused on this romance. You can't put the father through all the way in quite the same way. You'd break it up. But by distributing them to all these characters, you're in a way achieving the same thing of saturation by another means. It was brilliant.
I agree.
love those.
High praise, and I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will say that is, a lot of people would not have let me do that, because that's really scary.
I love that everyone said yes, that had to say yes. They got, my partner's a first AD, I get it. Anything, scripts also are instruments for everybody else making the thing possible. So when people go, oh, it's a husk, and I throw it over my shoulder, I'm like, you already don't understand how films get made in 20 days in Hamilton and not have the right library. Like, you don't know what you're talking about, is what I want to say. And now I have. I feel better. Thank you. I have kept you late. But I want to make sure that I say thank you for this. Both the book and the movie really hit for me, you can tell. Thank you for coming to hear these brilliant women talk about their work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen, Naomi, and Martha, for that incredible, deep dive on bridging worlds through adaptation so beautifully. Big thank you to inkCanada for bringing this session to life. This conversation was produced by Jen Pogue, Ashley Rains, and Bern Euler for Canadian Film Fest. Music by Brett Higgins. This episode of Cheers and Chats podcast is co-produced, edited, and sound mixed by Avery Hughes. For more info on the fun happening now at CFF, find us at canfilmfest.ca.